Hey, you! The flight crew check-in area is downstairs. This isn't a place for someone like you to be.
Excuse me, I have every right to be here.
No, you don't. Get out now.
This is ridiculous.
You're on administrative leave. You have no authority on this aircraft. This is a restricted area. Leave, now! You're embarrassing yourself in front of all these passengers.
He was sitting at the crew lounge table with his phone, and a Danish, and the relaxed certainty of someone who had never walked into a room and wondered if he belonged in it.
Captain Coleman, you're on administrative leave. You have no authority here. Step away from that door now, or I'll have security remove you in front of everyone.
Mr. Kessler.
Ground that aircraft now. This is not a request. That aircraft has a cracked engine mount, flagged twice and never repaired.
I'm Captain Coleman, she said. Apex 174 to Dallas. Greer looked up. He looked at the stripes. He looked at her face. He looked back at the stripes the way certain men do, not computing the information, just deciding how much of it to accept. He said. He picked up his phone. She walked to the coffee station. She poured her coffee. She did not let her hand shake, because her hand was not going to shake on her first day at this airline. She heard Greer say to the man beside him, in the voice people use when they want you to hear, "They're putting them in everything now." She carried her coffee to the far counter. She stood there and breathed. She thought about her mother, about the night shift at Grady Hospital, about 42 years of being the person in the room nobody expected to be as good as she was. She thought, 2 more minutes. Then I walk into that briefing room and I fly. She did not get 2 more minutes. Raymond Kessler was already at the head of the briefing table when she came through the door. 8 crew members looked up. The first officer, a young man with neat locks and a green Apex lanyard, stopped turning pages in his flight plan. One flight attendant, the only one who would meet her eyes, looked up and then carefully backed down. Kessler was 58, silver at the temples, a pleasant face, the kind of face that had learned, over decades, to keep the pleasant and the lethal in the same expression at the same time. Captain Coleman. "Good morning, Captain Kessler. We need you to wait outside." The room went quiet, not the dramatic quiet of people surprised, the quiet of people who had been expecting something and were relieved to see it arriving on schedule. "I'm sorry," she said. "There's been a scheduling adjustment." He said it with the unhurried calm of a man delivering weather. "It won't take long. I've reviewed the flight plan. I've logged 73 SFO. Approaches, Captain Coleman. Still pleasant, still calm. We need you to trust the process. Trust the process." She had heard that phrase before. She had heard it in the Air Force from a squadron commander who meant, "Know your place." She had heard it in flight school from an instructor who meant, "Stop being right in front of people." She knew what trust the process meant when it came out of a white man's mouth in a room where she was the only black woman wearing 4 stripes. It meant, "Wait outside." She turned. She walked back out through the door. The man in the dark jacket at the gate counter 15 feet away had been on the phone when she entered the briefing room. He was still on the phone now, but he was not talking into it. He was watching her come back through that door, and he was watching her face, and he was cataloguing something. He had the particular stillness of a man who was used to seeing things that other people missed. Jade found a chair against the wall. She sat down. She put her bag at her feet. She looked at her watch. 5:41 a.m. Inside the briefing room, Kessler's voice continued through the glass. Steady, unhurried. The briefing was moving forward without her, the way things at Apex Airlines had been moving forward without people like her for 32 years. She thought about Greer's voice in the crew lounge. "Honey." She thought about the word trust. She thought about the way the first officer had stopped turning pages. She had been in this building for 37 minutes. It had already happened twice. She did not know yet that it would keep happening. She did not know yet about Leon Davis or the USB drive or the fracture in the engine mount of N447AS. She did not know about Keisha Mitchell. She did not know that the man watching her from the gate counter held 19% of this airline, or that his name was Victor Nicorsi, or that he had been filing away a particular kind of information about Raymond Kessler for 3 years, and was still waiting to be handed the piece that made everything else make sense. She only knew what she could see. 2 rooms in one building, and she had been pushed out of both of them before 8 in the morning. This is what happened in the weeks that followed. And what happened changed more than one person's life. It changed 156 tons of aluminum and titanium that was scheduled to carry 211 people over the Gulf of Mexico on a Friday morning. It changed what those 211 people would never know they owed to a woman who sat in a hallway with her coffee and her 4 stripes and decided, quietly and without announcing it, that she was not going to pretend she had not seen what she had seen. Stay with me. She sat for 42 minutes. The crew came out. The first officer glanced at her once, quickly, and looked away. The flight attendants filed past without making eye contact, except for one woman, dark-skinned, braids pinned up, maybe 30, who met Jade's eyes for exactly 1 second before following the others toward the jet bridge. Kessler came out last. He did not look at her. He walked past her chair as though she were furniture and disappeared in the direction of the executive offices. Jade sat for 2 more minutes after that. She thought about her mother working the overnight shift at Grady Hospital and never leaving a patient alone on a bad night. She thought about her grandmother's house in West End Atlanta and a 747 banking over the rooftop and what she had felt in her chest at 6 years old watching it go. Then she picked up her bag and went to find out what she was scheduled to do instead. What she was scheduled to do instead was shadow Captain Alan Greer on a 50-minute hop to Birmingham. The man who had called her honey at the coffee station. The man who did not think she was there. She sat in the jump seat directly behind him. He acknowledged her presence in the jump seat the way you acknowledge the seat itself. You know it's there, because the design requires it. Jade Coleman had been flying aircraft since she was 19 years old, and she did not know how to sit in a cockpit without working. She pre-flighted the aircraft in her head from memory, system sequence, cross-checking Greer and his first officer in real time against what she knew. During the walk-around, she read the maintenance log. She was not supposed to. Jump seat occupants are observers. But she did not know how to stand in front of a maintenance log without reading it, the same way she did not know how to walk past a door without checking if it was locked. She found a date entry for the intake valve inspection that was 11 days older than the service cycle should have allowed. A small irregularity, the kind of thing that happened sometimes. The kind of thing that, in a pattern, was not nothing. She filed it mentally. She did not say anything to Greer. The flight was uneventful, 51 minutes in the air. Greer narrated his actions during descent with the flat patience of a man explaining a telephone to someone he expected to need it, explained twice. She absorbed the humiliation and watched his instruments and thought about the date discrepancy and about the word trust and about a crew lounge and a briefing room on the same morning. Pattern recognition was how she had stayed alive for 20 years. She was beginning to recognize one. Her apartment was in Vine City, 3 miles from Hartsfield. She had moved to Atlanta for this job, which meant the apartment was too large, too quiet, and full of boxes she had not fully unpacked because some part of her was waiting to find out if this was going to last long enough to be worth hanging the pictures. Her mother called while she was eating rice and black-eyed peas over the sink. "How was it?" her mother said. "Fine," Jade said. "You said fine like your father used to say fine." "It was my first day, Mama." Did you eat?" "I'm eating right now." "Rice? And what?" "The peas you sent." "Okay, call me tomorrow." She put the phone on the counter and stood at the window and looked at the city going dark outside and thought about the maintenance logs and Greer's voice and the word trust and the flight attendant who had looked at her for 1 second before looking away. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened it. The text read, "The last black captain who sat in that hallway asked too many questions. Look up Keisha Mitchell. They made sure there's nothing to find." She set down her fork. She read it again. Then she opened her laptop and searched every aviation database she had access to. FAA, Airman Certification Registry, FAPA, Pilot Database, LinkedIn, the Apex Airlines Press Archive, the the Women in Aviation International Directory. Nothing. Not a professional record anywhere. Not a line in a press release. Not a headshot in a welcome to the team announcement. She found one thing, a Facebook post from 5 years ago, on what appeared to be a personal account, from Akeisha Mitchell in Atlanta, celebrating earning her ATP certificate. The account had been inactive since. The profile photo was a woman in sunglasses in front of a small airport. Jade could not see her face. That was it. Any pilot with enough hours to be a captain candidate at a regional carrier had a digital footprint in the aviation world. Certifications, ratings, type endorsements, employment history. Those things existed somewhere. You could not erase them completely, unless someone had gone to considerable trouble. She texted back, "Who is this?" The number went dead. She lay awake until 2 in the morning. When she finally slept, it was not deep. When she got up at 5:15, the text was still there, and the number was still dead, and she had 11 more days of shadow rotation ahead of her before she was scheduled to fly as captain for the first time. She made coffee. She opened the green notebook she kept for observations that were not safe to put anywhere else. She wrote, Greer, Kessler, maintenance dates, Keisha Mitchell. What else don't I know yet? She underlined the last line. Then she got dressed and went back to the airport. The next week, Jade shadowed 3 different captains on 3 different routes. The pattern was clear, if you knew how to read it. The least desirable assignments, the most inconvenient scheduling, the maximum number of ways to make a person feel like a guest in a house she didn't belong in without ever doing anything that could be written up. She kept notes, not on her phone. In the green notebook, she used a shorthand she had developed in the Air Force for mission logs, abbreviated, non-sequential, nothing that read as a complaint if someone found it, just data, dates and tail numbers and discrepancies, small things, a log date that didn't align with a service cycle, a downgrade notation on a fuel line inspection that she couldn't find a reference standard for, a signature on a cleared check that belonged to a tech she had not seen in the bay on the shift in question. She did not know yet what the pattern was. She knew there was one. Day 4. She was assigned to Shadow Flight 208 to Charlotte. The first officer on that flight was Derek Okafor. She knew his name from the crew list. She did not know him. He was the first person at Apex Airlines who said good morning to her like he meant it. Captain Coleman, he said during the pre-flight, not looking up from the weather brief. Air Force, right? F-16S? For a while, she said. You're flying 737S now. How does that feel? Like driving a school bus after a motorcycle? He laughed. First real laugh she had heard in 4 days that wasn't at someone else's expense or performing for a room. They didn't talk much during the flight. She was in the jump seat. He was at his station. But during descent he caught a small radio frequency transposition error before she could mention it, corrected it without comment, and continued his checklist with the methodical calm of someone who had developed that calmness on purpose, rather than born with it. He was good, careful without being rigid, the kind of pilot who flew like he respected the airplane. After the flight, in the terminal, he fell into step beside her, not touching, just walking in the same direction. I know what they're doing to you, he said low, not turning his head. She said. Kessler's done it before, usually faster, but... He was quiet for a moment. Watch the maintenance logs, not just for your assigned flights. In general. Why? He kept walking. Didn't answer that. Said instead, if you need someone to talk to who isn't looking for a reason to write you up, you know where to find me. Then he turned at the gate junction and went in a different direction. She stood there for a moment, watching him go, walked to the next gate, opened the green notebook, wrote, Derek Okafor, logs. Why logs? Underlined the middle word. Twice. The following Tuesday, Jade was in the Apex Gate area at Hartsfield waiting for a pre-flight brief that had been delayed for the 3rd time in an hour with no explanation. She had stopped asking for explanations. She was reading a weather pattern analysis on her tablet and eating a granola bar that tasted like cardboard and thinking about calling her mother. She did not notice the man sit down across from her until he spoke. "You're the captain who waited outside. Dark slacks, grey shirt, no tie, probably 50. The quiet around him was not the quiet of someone who was shy. It was the quiet of someone who had learned that speaking less made people lean toward you. She remembered him from day one, at the gate counter, watching. "You were there," she said. "I was there. And," he considered, "I found it interesting. The way you sat down afterward, like you were filing something away." She put her tablet down. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" He almost smiled. Didn't quite get there. Not at the moment. He stood up. He took a card from his jacket pocket. Plain white. Just a name and a number. Nothing else. And set it on the seat beside her. "If there's something I can help you with," he said. At some point, he walked toward the gate. She looked at the card. Victor Newcossy. A Houston area code. She picked it up and held it for a moment, looking at his back as he disappeared around the corner. Derek found her 20 minutes later, dropped into the seat across from her and said, "You were just talking to someone. Grey shirt, tall. You know him?" He sat down, said something vague, left a card. "What card?" She held it up. Derek was quiet for exactly 2 seconds, the kind of 2 seconds that meant he was doing something with what he was seeing. "Victor Nkosi," he said. "You know him. Everybody in aviation knows him. Or should." Derek looked at her, reading her face. "He doesn't look like what he is. That's intentional." His fund, Nkosi Capital, led the Series C for Apex 4 years ago, $208 million. He holds 19% of this airline. He is worth, depending on which Forbes quarter you believe, somewhere between $3 and $4 billion. Jade looked at the card. "He didn't mention any of that," she said. "He never does." Derek paused. "What did he say?" "He said he'd been at the gate when Kessler sent me outside. Said he found it interesting. Left the card. Interesting. That was his word." Derek picked at the edge of his boarding pass. "People like Nkosi don't give cards to random junior captains in gate areas. He came to find you, meaning he's been thinking about you since day one." Jade looked at the card again. Then she put it in the green notebook, between 2 pages, pressed it closed. "I need to find Keisha Mitchell," she said. Derek went still. She had been waiting to say that name to someone, not someone she trusted completely. She had known Derek for 4 days, but someone who knew this airline, who had been inside it long enough to know where the bones were buried. She told him about the text, the dead number, the single Facebook post, the silence where a pilot's record should have been. He didn't say anything for a while. The gate area moved around them. Boarding calls over the PA, rolling luggage, a child asking a question nobody answered. "I knew her name," he said finally. "When I first started here, someone mentioned her. Captain candidate. A few years back. Left. I assumed it was her choice." He stopped. "Nobody told me that. You just assumed." "I just assumed." He looked at the boarding pass in his hands, turned it over. "That's the part that bothers me now. Nobody said she was pushed out. They didn't have to. The assumption was built into how the story didn't get told." He looked up. "What are you going to do?" he said. "I don't know yet." She picked up her tablet. "I'm going to keep watching the maintenance logs." Jade. He had never used her first name before. "Be careful what you write down on company devices." She held up the green notebook. He nodded. She found Leon Davis on accident, which was not exactly true. She had been looking for him the way you look for a specific cloud formation. You know what you're watching for. You're not sure when it will appear, and when it does, you recognize it before you can say why. Leon ran the overnight maintenance shift for the 737 fleet. She had started walking through the maintenance bay on her way to and from the gate area, because it was technically not off-limits, and because she believed in knowing the terrain. He was one of 3 crew members who consistently acknowledged her. 2 of them gave her the nod that you give any adult you recognize as not a threat. Leon Davis gave her the nod that said something else. The nod of a man who had seen enough of something to be relieved when he spotted another person who was also seeing it. She didn't push. She gave it time. It took 11 days. She was walking to her car in the parking structure, level 3, a Thursday evening. When she heard footsteps behind her, she turned. Leon was crossing toward his truck, which happened to be parked 3 spaces from hers. "Don't look at me directly," he said, low. The ramp noise below them filled the structure with enough ambient sound that a conversation here wouldn't carry. "And don't write anything down until you're at home." "Okay," she said. She was looking at her car door. Flight 447 to Miami. Departs Friday at 11:15. 211 passengers. I know the flight. The number 3 engine on that aircraft. Engine mount. Left side bolt housing. Microfracture. Caught it in inspection 6 weeks ago. I wrote it up. My supervisor wrote it up. 2 weeks later, Kessler's office downgraded it to monitor and document. Not repair. Monitor. Jade's hand stayed on her car door handle. I wrote it up again 3 weeks ago. Put the ultrasonic imaging in the report. The fracture has propagated 14% since the first flag. At current thermal cycle rate. Structural failure, somewhere in the next 200 flight hours. He paused. Flight 447 is the 18th scheduled service flight since the second flag. The math was easy. The math was terrible. I have all of it, Leon said. Both reports. The imaging, Kessler's downgrade memo, and the email chain with the maintenance contractor, SkyMech Solutions, where somebody in his office agreed to clear flagged items below severity level 4 pending quarterly audit. He took a breath. On a drive. He walked to his truck. "Leon," she said. He stopped, but didn't turn. "I've got 2 kids in college," he said, "and my wife is on dialysis 3 times a week. I need this job more than I know how to tell you. I'm not saying I won't help. I'm saying I need to know what it's going to cost me before I put it all on the table. I understand. Do you?" "I do. Completely. I'm not going to tell you there's no cost. I'm going to tell you I won't let you carry it alone." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to his truck, reached through the window, and came back. He set a USB drive on the roof of her car and walked away without looking at her again. She sat in the driver's seat for 3 minutes before she reached up and took it. She drove home. She locked the door. She pulled the blinds. She made a cup of coffee she didn't need and sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop and the USB drive and her hands very still on the table for about 30 seconds. Then she plugged in the drive. It contained 6 files. 2 maintenance discrepancy reports authored by Leon Davis, both flagged and both dated, both with the aircraft tail number visible. 1 ultrasonic scan showing fracture propagation measurements, annotated in Leon's handwriting. Clean handwriting, she noted. The handwriting of a man who understood that what he wrote had to be legible to someone who would look at it later. A memo from Raymond Kessler's office signed by his assistant, she noted, not by Kessler directly downgrading the engine mount flag from severity 3 to a monitor and document classification with no grounding requirement. An internal email chain between Kessler's office and SkyMech Solutions, discussing what they called schedule optimization and turnaround target maintenance, and 1 line in one of those emails that read, "Per our arrangement, flagged items below severity level 4 will be cleared for continued service pending quarterly audit. Per our arrangement." She read it 3 times. Per our arrangement. That phrase did not appear in any FAA regulation she had ever read. It did not appear in any Apex Airlines maintenance protocol she had been shown during onboarding. It appeared in a private email between the SVP of operations of a commercial airline and an outside maintenance contractor, in a thread that was clearly the continuation of a longer conversation that the emails in front of her did not show. Per our arrangement. She thought about the maintenance logs she had been reading for 2 weeks, the dates that didn't align, the downgrade notations without clear reference standards, the signatures on cleared checks from technicians who weren't on the shift in question. She had been looking at the edges of something without being able to name it. Now she could name it. This was not corner cutting, born of carelessness. This was a designed system, a negotiated arrangement between an SVP of operations and an outside contractor for determining in advance which mechanical flags did not need to be resolved before aircraft flew. It had been running for at least 3 years. It had been put in writing. Somebody had decided that was safe, that the emails were safe, that the language was soft enough, that the maintenance crew would stay quiet. Leon Davis had not stayed quiet. She closed the laptop, sat in the kitchen with her coffee going cold, opened the laptop again. She filed the ASRS report at 1:14 in the morning. The aviation safety reporting system, she knew the site from her Air Force days, had used it twice for near-miss incidents that needed to be documented, without triggering command-level investigations. Confidential, anonymous if you needed it to be. FAA couldn't penalize you for a good faith report. She filled in every field. She was specific about the tail number, the fracture reports, the downgrade memo, the SkyMech email chain. She attached the scanned files. Then she sent a copy to Dr. Phyllis Aaron at Georgia Tech, who she had known for 7 years, and who had, in 2 decades of aerospace engineering research, accumulated more informal FAA contacts than anyone Jade had ever met. She didn't know if Phyllis would be the right call. She made it anyway. Then she stared at Victor Nicosi's card for a while. She put it back in the notebook. She set an alarm for 5 a.m. and went to lie down on her bed in her clothes. She did not sleep. Kessler summoned her the next morning. Not through HR, not through email. A handwritten note delivered by his assistant to the crew lounge at 8:15. The assistant, a young white woman who looked 22 and perpetually anxious, handed Jade the envelope and left before Jade had finished opening it. The note said, "Captain Coleman, please come to my office at 10 a.m. R. Kessler," she told Derek in a text. His response came back in 30 seconds. "Don't go alone. Ask me to come." She texted back, "You can't come. They'll make you a target." He typed for a moment. Then, "I'm already a target. I've been talking to you. Bring your phone on record." She thought about that. She left it in her pocket, recording, and went up to the 14th floor. Kessler's office had glass walls on 2 sides and a view of the north terminal and the aircraft moving below it. He was behind his desk when she came in. He did not offer her a chair. She sat anyway. "I understand you've been spending time in the maintenance bay," he said. "I believe in knowing the aircraft I fly. You've been talking to maintenance staff. As part of familiarization, you've been asking questions." She kept her voice even. "I ask questions about everything, Captain Kessler. That's how I've stayed alive through 20 years of flying." He let that land. He did not react to it. He folded his hands on the desk with the patience of a man who had never needed to hurry a conversation in his life. "I want to share something with you," he said, in a spirit of honesty, "because I think honesty serves us both." Jade did not move. There was a pilot who sat in that same hallway 4 years ago. Smart woman. Strong record. She came to Apex the way you came to Apex, with the best intentions and the confidence that experience was enough. He paused, shook his head slightly, the way you shake your head at a memory that carries some weight. She started asking questions about procedures, about documentation, built a case in her head that she thought was airtight. She looked at him. She was wrong, he said. The investigation she triggered found no violations, and in the aftermath, the relationships she had damaged, the morale she had affected, the trust she had broken. He shook his head again. There's no recovering from something like that. She resigned. She teaches high school now in Baton Rouge. A beat. She doesn't fly anymore. He looked at her steadily. "I'm telling you this," he said, "because I think you're intelligent enough to understand what I'm not quite saying." Jade looked back at him for a long moment. She thought about the ultrasonic scan on the USB drive, the fracture propagation annotated in Leon Davis's careful handwriting, the 18 flights since the second report. 211 passengers who would sit down in that aircraft tomorrow morning and buckle their seatbelts and look out the window and not know. I appreciate your honesty, she said. I'll take it under advisement. She stood up. She walked out. In the elevator going down, she pulled her phone from her pocket and stopped the recording. She had 47 minutes of audio. She texted Derek, "We need to move tonight. Come to mine after your last flight. Don't use your work phone to confirm." His reply came from his personal number an hour later. "I'll be there at 9. He arrived at 9:12, and she had already spread the printed copies across the kitchen table. He sat down and read for 30 minutes without speaking. When he finished, he sat back and looked at the ceiling with the expression of someone who has been suspecting something for a long time and does not particularly enjoy being confirmed. "Per our arrangement," he said. "Yes. How old is that email?" 3 years, which means the downgrade system has been in place for at least 3 years. And I've only been looking at logs for 2 weeks. I don't know how far back it goes." He was quiet. "The fracture report," he said. "If that aircraft makes its Friday schedule, it's the 18th post-flag flight. Leon's imaging puts structural failure risk within the next 200 hours at current propagation rate. The aircraft has 3 more flights scheduled before its next deep inspection." Derek looked at the table. "Okay," he said. "We file with the FAA tonight. I already submitted the ASRS report last night, but the ASRS is slow. It might trigger action in days. Flight 447 is in 38 hours. So we need someone who can move faster than the FAA. We need someone who can ground a specific aircraft before 11:15 Friday morning." Derek looked at Victor Nkosi's card where she had left it on the table. "He's staying at the Marriott Airport," Derek said. "He always does when he's in Atlanta. He's on the board. He has the standing. He approved the SkyMech contract." "What?" "Nkosi Capital was on the Apex board 3 years ago when SkyMech was brought on. He signed off on the contract. He may not know what was built into it, but his name is on the approval." Derek sat with that. "You're telling him anyway," he said. Not a question. 211 passengers. He looked at the table for another moment. "I'll call Simone," he said. "She's been keeping records on her own. Safety concerns, crew complaints, things she's witnessed. She's been sitting on them because she didn't know what to do with them. If Nkosi gets an email with Simone's documentation on top of yours, it's harder to call this one angry pilot with an axe to grind. Don't use your Apex email for anything about this." "I know, Derek." She waited until he looked up. "They are going to come after you for talking to me. They probably already know." He met her eyes steadily. "I know that too," he said. "You don't have to, Jade. An aircraft is going to fly tomorrow with a fracture in its engine mount that 2 people documented and nobody fixed. That's the thing I'm looking at. Everything else is secondary." She held his gaze for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. He sent Simone the message from his personal phone at 10:47 that night. She went to sleep at midnight and set her alarm for 4:30. She was in the crew lounge at 6 a.m. when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that said, "I received something this morning. I think you sent indirectly. I'm at the Marriott Airport. Room 11, 24, -C. Nkosi." She read it twice. She looked at the time. Flight 447 was in 17 hours. She stood up. She found the Marriott the way she had found every objective in her Air Force years, by walking toward it directly and not announcing herself until she was at the door. Room 11, 24. Victor answered without delay. He was in the same grey shirt from 2 days ago, or one exactly like it. His laptop was open on the desk. The room smelled like coffee and the night before departure energy of someone who lived a significant portion of their life in hotel rooms. He did not say welcome. He said, "Tell me what she sent you." She sat in one of the 2 chairs. She pulled up the files on her own phone copies, backed up in 3 separate places, because she was a military pilot, and she knew that single points of failure were how people died, and she laid it out for him. All of it. Leon's reports, the ultrasonic imaging, the SkyMech email chain, Kessler's downgrade memo, the phrase that appeared in the email from 3 years ago. He read. He did not rush. He read the fracture reports twice. He read the SkyMech emails slowly, and she watched the set of his jaw change without his expression quite changing. Per our arrangement, he said. That email is from 3 years ago. He looked up from the phone. I was on the board 3 years ago. I know. I approved the SkyMech contract. I know that too. He looked at her for a long moment. You came here anyway. The alternative was letting 211 people fly on a cracked engine mount because you might feel implicated. That wasn't a trade I was willing to make. He set the phone down on the desk. He was quiet long enough that she counted her own heartbeats. She had a habit of doing that in situations where waiting required patience. She was not sure she had. Then he said, "What do you need from me specifically?" "I need you to ground N447 AS before its 11:15 departure. You have board standing. If you call the chairman directly with the documentation, I am the chairman." She had not known that. She filed it. "Then you can issue the ground order yourself." "I can, and I will." He picked up his phone and began dialing before she had finished the sentence. He went to the window. She heard him say, very quietly, "I need a temporary ground order on N447 AS, Atlanta base, effective immediately, pending emergency structural inspection." He listened, said a few more words she couldn't hear, hung up. "The FAA Atlanta field office will have the formal documentation by 6 a.m. A friend of mine there has authority to trigger the mechanical hold," he said. "That covers the aircraft and Kessler that I need to handle in the board meeting." He turned from the window. "It's scheduled for this morning. I called it 2 days ago for unrelated reasons. Now it's no longer unrelated." Jade looked at him. "Captain Coleman," he said. He said it the way you say something when you have been holding it for a while. "Smare. On your Smare day. At the gate. When Kessler sent you out of that briefing room, she waited. I watched it happen, and I filed it as an HR matter, as something internal that would sort itself out." He paused. "I was wrong. It doesn't sort itself out. It never sorted itself out for any of the people it's happened to. I have 19% of this airline, and I spent 3 years signing contracts without asking why the maintenance approval rate was as high as it was. Because the financials were solid, and the board meetings were smooth, and nobody brought me a problem I couldn't defer." He looked at her steadily. "I am asking now." "Good," she said. "Then let's talk about what happens in that meeting." She was back at Hartsfield by 8:15. She was at her car, in the staff parking structure, level 3, checking her phone, when she saw Derek's text come in. "They called me to HR. Don't call me on Apex line." She texted back on her personal. "What happened?" He called. "Hostile work environment," he said. There was something in his voice she had not heard in their weeks of working alongside each other. Not panic, but a tight wound sound. The particular sound of someone walking into the weight of a decision they made, fully knowing what it cost. And conduct unbecoming. "They suspended me pending investigation. 2 weeks, possibly longer." She was quiet. "They have a photograph," he said. "Someone was watching my movements. They have me at your building 2 nights ago." "Derek, I'm not sorry I was there. I know. I just need you to know that I knew this could happen, and I was there anyway. That's not your fault." She stood in the parking structure, with her hand flat against the roof of her car, and she thought about her mother again, about 42 years of night shifts, and not leaving a patient alone on a bad night. She thought about Leon Davis's 2 kids in college, and his wife on dialysis. She thought about Keisha Mitchell teaching high school in Baton Rouge, and never flying again. She thought about what it cost, and she thought about what it cost not to. "Is there anything you need from me right now?" she said. "No." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm standing in the parking structure where Leon Davis gave me the USB drive," she said. "I'm looking at the spot where he set it on my tire well, and I think I am about to have the worst morning of my professional life. But yes, I'm okay. He was quiet for a moment. Victor called me too, he said. Last night, after you left his room. He has my number. He told me to be at the airport this morning. Not at the gate, just in the building. Good. Be there, Jade. He paused. Whatever happens in the next few hours after this, when it's done, I want to take you to dinner. The kind where you don't bring the green notebook. She laughed once, short, and it surprised her. She hadn't expected to laugh. You picked a hell of a time, she said. I know, but I wanted to say it before the hard part. Okay, she said. After. Dinner. No notebook. Good, he said. I'll see you in there. She hung up and stood there for another 30 seconds. Then her phone rang again. Unknown number. Atlanta area code. She answered it. Captain Coleman. A man's voice, professional, uninflected. This is Nathan Park from Apex HR. I'm calling regarding your employment status. Go ahead. As a result of an ongoing investigation into unauthorized access of maintenance facilities and communication of proprietary company information to outside parties, Apex Airlines is placing you on administrative review effective immediately. Your flight privileges and facility access are suspended. She said nothing. Additionally, you are required to surrender your enhanced access badge to HR by 5 p.m. today. A pause. There is an offer on the table that we'd like you to consider. What offer? $250,000. Standard NDA covering all matters related to your employment with Apex Airlines, including any observations regarding company procedures, personnel, or internal communications. Your employment record would reflect a voluntary resignation. She wrote the number in her notebook. $250,000 for 20 years of flight experience. For Leon Davis's 2 decades in a maintenance bay, for Derek Okafor's suspension, for Keisha Mitchell's teaching position in Baton Rouge, for Flight 447 and 211 passengers who didn't know they were the bargaining chip. We'd need an answer by end of business Thursday, Nathan Park said. It's Friday, she said. A short silence. I'm sorry. End of business Thursday passed. It's Friday morning. She looked at her watch. 8:37 a.m. Another silence. We can extend the deadline. No, she said. You don't need to extend it. My answer is no. She hung up. She put the phone in her jacket pocket and looked at the airport building in front of her and the aircraft on the ramp beyond it. And somewhere in the distance, the tail number N447AS on a plane that was supposed to take off in 2 hours and 38 minutes. She walked into the building. She did not have her Apex ID badge. She had her ATP certificate and her Air Force ID, and the particular walk of a person who belongs in a place, whether or not they currently have the lanyard to prove it. She got through security on the ATP. She walked the terminal. The morning crowd was the particular density of a Friday. Families and business travelers, children in rolling backpacks, men in earbuds walking fast. The announcement boards showed Flight 447 to Miami at Gate D42, on time, boarding at 10:50. She rounded the corner at D40, stopped. Raymond Kessler was at the gate. He was in his full uniform, which he never wore anymore for anything except formal board appearances. He was standing near the boarding door with his hands folded in front of him, looking through the window at N447AS on the ramp. She did not know what he was thinking. She did not know if he was trying to watch over something he was afraid of losing, or if he was simply there to make sure no one interfered. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he was there, and the aircraft was there, and the boarding agent was already at the gate counter with the passenger list, and the gate area was filling up. Derek appeared at her right shoulder. He was in dark civilian clothes, suspended, not authorized to be airside. He had come anyway. Victor? She said quietly, on his way from the executive lounge. 2 minutes. She looked at the gate. The boarding agent, a young woman with shoulder-length braids and an Apex lanyard, glanced up at the crowd and then back at her screen. Is Leon here? No. He's being processed by the FBI at the field office. Voluntary cooperation. Victor's attorney arranged it last night. She looked at the gate door. 2 minutes is a long time, she said. She started walking toward the gate. Kessler saw her when she was 10 feet away. Something crossed his face. Not surprise, not fear, the expression of a man recalculating. Fast. She had seen that expression before. In the office. In the hallway on day 1. The face of someone who had been doing this for a long time and was very good at deciding, in real time, which version of events would be most useful. Captain Coleman. His voice was even, quiet enough that the gate area passengers couldn't hear him over the ambient noise. You shouldn't be airside without. The aircraft needs to be grounded, she said. Not quiet. The boarding agent looked up. A woman in business class attire near the window turned her head. The aircraft has a documented engine mount fracture that was reported twice and downgraded without repair, Jade said. Steady, clear, the voice she used when she was calling out a system malfunction in a cockpit. Not panicked, not theatrical, just factual. It should not be in service. Kessler stepped toward her, lowering his voice further. This is not the place to. This is exactly the place, she said. There are 211 passengers about to board this aircraft. This is the only place. Captain Coleman. His voice had gone to the register she had heard in his office. Still pleasant, but with something underneath it now. Something that had given up on being subtle. You are on administrative leave. You have no authority here. If you do not leave this gate area immediately, I will have security, Mr. Kessler. Victor Nkosi's voice. He came from the direction of the executive lounge entrance. He was not alone. Behind him was a woman. Jade did not know. Black suit, federal agency posture, badge holder visible at her hip. Behind her, the FAA regional director Jade had spoken to at 4 a.m. through Dr. Phyllis Aaron's introduction. And behind him, Dr. Aaron herself, in a Georgia Tech polo, who had driven to the airport in the dark because she had looked at the ultrasonic imaging and called her FAA contact before sunrise and said, "This is real, move fast." The gate area had gone quieter. The boarding agent was not calling for pre-boarding anymore. Victor stopped in front of Kessler. He did not extend his hand. "I need you to authorize a ground hold on N447 AS pending emergency structural inspection," he said. Kessler's face recalculated again. Victor. Warm voice. The warmth of a 32-year relationship being deployed as a tool. "I didn't know you were coming down here personally. The aircraft was cleared by our maintenance team." "I know how it was cleared," Victor said. "I've read the reports, both of them, and the downgrade memo, and the SkyMech email chain from 3 years ago that used the phrase "per our arrangement" to describe a practice of clearing mechanical flags below severity 4 without repair." He paused. "I approved the SkyMech contract. I signed off on the partnership. I want you to know that I understand that. I also want you to know that understanding my responsibility in this does not make your actions any less clear." The gate area was very quiet now. The boarding agent had put down her scanner. 3 passengers near the window were watching. Kessler looked at Victor for a long count. He looked at the federal agent behind him. He looked at Jade. His face did something then that she had not seen it do before. Not anger, not calculation. Something simpler and more undefended than that. He looked, for a moment, like a man who had been holding a story together for a very long time and had just felt it start to come apart at the seam. He said quietly, "Victor, I have been running this airline, Raymond." Victor's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of someone closing a door. "Ground the aircraft." Kessler stood there. The federal agent stepped forward. "Mr. Kessler, I'm Special Agent Dana Frey, FBI Atlanta Field Office. I'd like to ask you to step away from the gate area." He looked at Jade one more time. She looked back at him. She did not say anything. She did not need to. He went with Special Agent Frey. The inspection team arrived at Gate D42 11 minutes after the ground hold was issued. They found the fracture in the engine mount at 11 minutes and 20 seconds, in the exact location Leon Davis had documented. The imaging he had done 3 weeks ago was accurate. The propagation was, if anything, slightly worse than his last measurement. The aircraft was grounded. The passengers of Flight 447 were rebooked. The boarding agent, whose name Jade eventually learned was Tamara Williams, brought her a gate area coffee that she had not asked for and did not charge her for, and said, very quietly, "Thank you," before going back to her counter to start making calls. Jade drank the coffee standing at the window, looking at N447AS on the ramp with the inspection team working around it. 211 people. None of them would ever know. That was the part she kept coming back to. Not the confrontation, not Kessler's face, not the federal agent. The 211 people who would take a different flight to Miami and watch a movie and drink a ginger ale and land safely and go about their lives and never know what they had not known. She was okay with that. It was the right outcome. Justice was not always visible to the people it protected. Kessler was arrested outside the Apex Tower at 11:47 a.m., not at the gate. Special Agent Frey was precise about where things happened and how they looked, and the arrest at the tower was quieter than the gate would have been. But nothing was quiet by then, because 2 board members had called Victor in the last hour. The FAA Atlanta office had issued a formal statement, and someone had already posted a 15-second video from Gate D42 to Twitter that had over 30,000 views and a headline on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution website that read, "Apex Airlines grounds aircraft amid executive arrest at Hartsfield following safety whistleblower." The AJC had gotten there fast. Jade had called them at 6 a.m. from a number they didn't have, left a name and a tip. They had moved. Victor held a brief statement at the Apex Tower at 1 p.m. that Jade watched on her phone in a hallway outside the boardroom. He said the airline was cooperating fully with the FAA and FBI investigations. He said any practices that had prioritized schedule over structural safety would be investigated thoroughly and addressed. He said Apex Airlines was grateful to the employees who had had the courage to document what they saw. He did not name her. That was her one ask. She put her phone in her pocket and went into the boardroom. The meeting took 40 minutes. By 2:35, the board had voted to open an independent investigation into SkyMex Solutions and all maintenance contracts executed during Kessler's tenure. At 2:50, they voted to reinstate Captain Jade Coleman immediately with full flight privileges and back pay for the duration of administrative leave. At 3:10, after a brief sidebar between Victor and the General Counsel, they issued a statement that Leon Davis was being recognized as a protected whistleblower witness, and that Apex was committed to ensuring his continued employment and safety. Simone Delacroix, who had sent Victor the 8 months of documentation she had kept on her personal phone, with a 1-sentence message, "Times I've been waiting for a reason to do this." Times was offered a formal position on the newly established Independent Safety Reporting Panel. She would later say it was the first time in 8 years at the airline that she had felt like someone was actually listening. Jade was in the hallway when Victor came out of the boardroom. "Done," he said. "I heard." He stopped beside her. He looked at the hallway wall, the framed photographs of Apex aircraft going back to the founding, the kind of corporate history display that every airline put up to communicate longevity. "There is going to be a vacancy," he said, "in the VP of Safety Operations position. The man who held it has been suspended pending investigation. I need someone who will not be managed by the people I need her to investigate. You said until Monday to think about it." "I did. The offer stands." She looked at the photographs. A 727 from 1,989. A 747 livery she didn't recognize. The old Apex tail logo, different from the current one, in colors that had faded even in the photograph. "Give me the weekend," she said. "You have it." He went back into the boardroom. Derek was in the lobby, still in civilian clothes. He would not be back in uniform until the reinstatement processed, which took 2 days. He was near the elevator bank with his hands in his pockets, the expression of a man who had been running on adrenaline since sunrise and was coming down from it in stages. "So," he said. "So, she said. They walked to the elevator. He held the door. She walked through. In the lobby, he held the building door too. She almost said something about that. She didn't. Outside, the Atlanta afternoon was warm in the way that late October in Atlanta sometimes surprised you, with the kind of warmth that reminded you summer had not completely surrendered yet, just been politely asked to wait around the corner. Traffic hummed on the access road. On the ramp, a ground crew was moving an aircraft off a gate with the ordinary choreography of people who did this hundreds of times a day. You know what I keep thinking about, Derek said. What? You talked to Victor Nkosi in the gate area for 4 minutes. You had no idea who he was. You just answered him like he was any other person. He is any other person. He owns $4 billion. He also owned 19% of an airline that was clearing cracked engine mounts. Having money doesn't make you a better observer of your own responsibilities. It sometimes makes you a worse one. She paused. He corrected for that. That's what matters. Derek was quiet for a moment. I want to take you to dinner, he said. I said it this morning, and I mean it. Not a work thing, not a debrief. Dinner. You. Me. No green notebook. She looked at the ramp. An aircraft was pushing back, moving slowly away from the gate, beginning its long process toward becoming airborne. She watched it go. You know what I keep thinking about, she said. What? Leon Davis's wife is on dialysis 3 times a week. His 2 kids are in college. He put that USB drive on my tire, and he did it knowing exactly what it could cost him. And I stood there and told him I wouldn't let him carry it alone. She looked at Derek. I meant that. I need to make sure that's real. It is real. Victor's attorney has already confirmed it. Leon is a protected witness. Apex isn't going to touch him. And when Kessler's lawyers start building a defense, and they need a narrative about a disgruntled employee making things up, then Victor Nkosi goes on record, in writing, with his own name, that his office approved a contract that was designed to facilitate fraud, and that Leon Davis is the person who documented it at personal risk. Derek shook his head. Victor feels responsible. He's going to be thorough. She looked at the ramp again. Okay, she said. Dinner, but I pick the restaurant. Deal, he said. And I'm paying. You were just reinstated with back pay. You can afford it. She almost smiled. That's not the point. I know, he said. What's the point? The point is that I'm not a person people pay for. I'm a person people have dinner with. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, Okay, you pay. Good. They walked to the parking structure together. 3 months later, Jade guided a Boeing 737-800 off runway 27L at Hartsfield in the clean October morning air. There was someone in the jump seat, a young woman named Imani Park, 26, black and Korean, from Decatur, 812 flight hours, working toward her ATP, doing a familiarization rotation through Apex's new Pathway to Captain program, the first such program in the airline's history, established in the reorganization 3 months prior. Imani was quiet during takeoff, through the climb-out, through the gear retraction. She was watching everything. Her eyes moved the way the eyes of someone moved who was trying to memorize the room, who knew they were in a room that mattered. At cruising altitude, over the Georgia countryside going gold in October, she said, Captain Coleman, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Is it always like this? The feeling, when you leave the ground. Jade looked at the horizon, clear all the way to the Florida coast, the Atlantic beyond it, invisible from here but there, the way certain things were always there even when you couldn't see them. She thought about 6 years old, on her grandmother's porch in West End Atlanta, watching the 747 bank over the rooftops. She thought about F-16S over the Euphrates at 2 in the morning, and the particular silence of controlled airspace when you were the only sound in it. She thought about a jump seat, and a first officer who noticed a radio error and said good morning like he meant it, about a parking structure on level 3, and a USB drive and a man who was afraid and showed up anyway, about an airport hotel room and a billionaire who read maintenance reports at midnight and understood, late, what he hadn't understood early enough, about an aircraft sitting on a ramp under an emergency ground hold, about 211 people who never knew. Yes, she said, it's always like this. Imani looked out the window for a long moment. Then she turned back to the instruments. Jade flew. Okay, let me step back before you close this out. I want to be straight with you about what's real and what isn't. Jade Coleman is not a real pilot. Apex Airlines is not a real airline. Raymond Kessler is not a real person. N447AS does not exist. Victor Nkosi and Leon Davis and Simone Delacroix and Derek Okafor and Imani Park are all invented. The cracked engine mount in evidence storage in Oklahoma City, that's fiction. Some things in this story are real. The aviation safety reporting system is real. The FAA created it in 1975, and it is still running. It is a confidential, voluntary reporting program where any aviation professional pilot, mechanic, flight attendant, air traffic controller can report a safety concern without facing civil penalty from the FAA. It has logged more than 2 million reports since it was founded. If you work in aviation and you see something, it is there. The website is ASRS, ARC, NASA, Gov. That address works. I checked. The statistic about black women in commercial aviation is also real. Fewer than 1% of commercial airline pilots in the United States are black women. The total number, as of the most recent survey by the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, is somewhere around 150. 150 women in a profession that employs over 90,000 commercial pilots. I did not exaggerate that number for the story. I used the actual one. Maintenance fraud in commercial aviation is real. Not common, not the norm, but real. The FAA investigates multiple cases every year. The pressure to prioritize schedule over safety. Contractors clearing flags that should not be cleared. Mechanics afraid to report what they find that is documented. It happens, and it is ongoing. The cases are usually quieter and more ambiguous than the story I told here. Most of them do not end with an arrest at a gate. Most of them end with paperwork and fines and nobody finding out. Keisha Mitchell is fictional, but the thing that happens to her is not. Women and people of color in the aviation industry report disproportionate rates of retaliation when they raise safety or discrimination concerns. Their complaints are more likely to be filed and closed. Their resignations are more likely to be accepted without question. I put Keisha Mitchell in this story because I wanted a name for what happens to the people who don't have the documentation to fight back. Most people don't. One more thing. Jade Coleman is fiction, but the woman she is based on is not an invention. She is a composite of every pilot, engineer, nurse, mechanic, teacher, and flight attendant I have read about, heard from, or sat next to who spent years being told to wait outside and didn't stop showing up, who kept the green notebook, who made the call, who stood at the gate. If that is you, if you are the person in your workplace or your field who sees what others ignore and says what others won't, I want you to know that I wrote this story about you specifically, not about a character, about you. The sky has never cared about the color of the hands on the controls, only about what those hands do when it matters. Take care of each other out there.